Hello there. Firstly, sorry about all the echo on the microphone. I've just moved house and the room's pretty empty at the moment. There's not a lot I can do about it, so I apologise, please bear with me. Secondly, I've picked myself up a couple of Sinclair Spectrums, and I bought these 6-7 weeks ago now, I think, and what with moving house and everything, I've not had the chance to dig into them, so now that I'm actually in and more or less settled, now's the time to pick up my hobby again. So got this one 48k plus model. The previous owner assured me it does work, although I've not tested it yet, so I don't know, I can only take his word for it. Said he's performed a composite output modification on it, and he included a power supply, but that power supply was a 5 volt centre pin positive switching unit. If you know these computers, you know you need 9 volts centre pin negative. A 5 volt supply will work, but it needs to be centre pin negative. So I'm hoping he's included that by accident, because if he's plugged it into this, he may have done some damage. Also, this brown box here, let me just zoom out. This was the other one. Now, this one was advertised as owned from new and unused, although I seriously question that. Well, I'll show you what I mean in a minute, but the pictures were honest enough, so I've no complaints. Again, I've no idea whether this works or not. It's a 48k rubber keyed Spectrum. I'm assuming this is the original box. Maybe this is just what it was posted in, because it does have certain stickers on it which indicate it as the 48k model, and the polys seem to fit. And again, we've got the sticker indicating 48k. Polys are in really nice condition. No power supply, which is fine. The seller did tell me about that. RF lead. Right, the unit itself. The guarantee card, which I'm probably too late to send off for. Software catalogue. More software. Basic programming manual, which is like brand new. And the introduction booklet. So I'll just put all these to one side. Have a look at the unit itself. Right, so it's got a sticker on it from the original retailer. Now, what makes me doubt this thing's new, if you look at the keyboard, particularly the cap shift, I don't see how something that's been completely unused wears that way, but whatever. And it's also missing 2 screws. And 2 of the feet are missing as well, so yeah, I'm pretty sure this has been used, but that's fine. It wasn't massively expensive, so I'm quite happy to continue. I'm going to dig into both of these. I'm going to do a couple of little continuity tests just to make sure that we've got no shorts or anything before I put power to it. And then we'll see if these things actually work. So let's dig into this one first. Like I said, 2 missing screws. Now, if I'm very careful and very lucky, I might get away with disconnecting this membrane in one piece. They go brittle with age, and it's quite common for them to break. Oh, that's making a crunching noise. Yep. Well, that's out. I think it survived. Maybe I can reuse that membrane. So we've got an issue 2 board. It's got an additional capacitor here, which means there was a recall, not a recall I should say, a modification to the issue 2 boards where this extra capacitor was installed. There was a resistor value changed, and that was to make the computer less susceptible to damage should the expansion port be unplugged while the computer's on. We've got the modification transistor down here. On issue 3 and later, I think that became TR6, but it was just sort of haphazardly soldered in on these early issue 2s. Everything looks nice and clean. Doesn't look like it's had any work. There is a bit of scoring on the expansion port, which does confirm my theory that this isn't in any way new. Let me just compare this to another issue 2 that I've got, and I'll just show you that for the same issue you can get slight differences on the board. Right, so just for comparison, I've got another issue 2 board here. This is one I bought, oh god, 10, 12 years ago maybe. I got it from the original owner for not a lot of money, and it's immaculate. But although this is an issue 2, it's the same revision as the other computer, there are some slight differences. So you'll notice the disk capacitors we used in these early ones. But the biggest thing you'll notice is this thing right here. And that's the dead cockroach modification. So the issue 1 Spectrums and the very early issue 2s had a problem with keyboard input, only responding, I think it was 50% of the time. So there was a workaround cobbled together, and it affected all the issue 1s. And the reason it's got this on the issue 2 as well, because it has an issue 1 ULA. So they were obviously just using up stock, so they had to perform the same modification as well. So with Sinclair, even when you get something of the same revision, expect changes to be made as they go along as well. So not everything's going to be the same. Anyway, I'll put that away. Back to this. Right, so my next job with this is just a few pre-flight checks. There's a rather excellent YouTuber called, is it Jules per column, or however you pronounce it? If I got that wrong, I apologise to the gentleman. And in it he discusses how to check resistances on 48K spectrums before you apply power to try to avoid any damage. So following his instructions, that's what I'm going to do now. Effectively all I'm going to do is make sure we've got no shorts to ground, no shorts on the coil, voltage regulator doesn't have any shorts. I did have a 48K Spectrum a while ago, and I got it, and the first thing I did was plug it in, and it made a very, very loud buzzing noise, and I was getting all sorts of artifacts on the screen. And what had happened is the lower RAM had failed. The 4116 chips, and the 12 volts were shorting directly to ground, so they were all dead. Because with these chips, I don't think they're the most reliable, and usually when you've got a problem with a Spectrum, it tends to be them. So I'm going to be just checking the power rails there, because they take 5 volts, -5 volts and 12 volts, and if there's any problem with the power circuitry anywhere, it'll kill these chips. And in my experience, it doesn't just kill one of them, they'll all die as well. And these things are starting to get a bit rare now, so rather than put power straight to it and cause some damage, I think I'll just do these checks first. So I'll just zip through. So I don't have a posh multimeter that bleeps, but this will do. So ground is fine. Correct resistance there. I won't go through it in any detail. I would recommend you watch that gentleman's video. Seems fine. Let's put it back in its case. I should be okay to apply power to this now. So what I will do before I apply any power to anything is I'll just convert the output signal to the TV to composite. Saves me having to tune the thing in, and I'm going to be doing it anyway, so I might as well do it now. So all I'm going to do is two connections there. So this left one, that's the composite video signal. That can simply be passed straight out. And this one here, that's the 5-volt supply for the modulator, and that just needs to be disconnected. I really should buy some smaller clips. Oh. There's a resistor in there connected to the output. I'm just going to snip that. Now you can just put a wire directly from this output straight to the socket. I prefer to use a 4.7 microfarad capacitor. I just think it looks a bit better. So positive lead to the board, negative to the output. Okay, so all the pre-flight checks are done. We should be safe to power this up, although you can never be 100%, especially when I'm doing something. So let's give it a whirl. Like I've said, I won't go into detail about those checks, but I will put a link into the gentleman's YouTube video. It's rather excellent, so I recommend checking it out. And I've just followed his steps. Anyway, let's put some power to this and see if it actually does anything. No, it doesn't. Oh no, it does. I've just got a very, very, very loose power supply socket there, so. Okay, well it works, but the power supply socket is terrible. I think I've got a replacement somewhere. Picture's very fuzzy as well, so maybe the capacitors aren't very good. Let's disconnect that for now. Okay. Fine, that's something to be getting on with. So, okay, so I know it boots up and it works. Picture's a bit fuzzy and that power connector is terrible. So I think replace the capacitors, either tighten this up or change it. And we'll see if that improves things. final thing I like to do with these as well is just reflow the solder on the coil. I tend to find it just quietens them down a bit. And also reflow the ear and mic sockets as well. Just with these things, they tend to sit on floors, don't they, and get tripped over and cables get yanked, and these things can just work loose. Right, we can probably power this back on now and see if that's improved things. Okay then, so recapping done, system working. So I've replaced the voltage regulator simply because the old one was rusty. That buzzing you can hear, if you can hear it, it's just the coil. It seems fairly common for all SU2s to make that noise, so I've decided not to worry about it. I've used Vichy capacitors. As far as I can tell, they have a good reputation. Composite mod, I've used a capacitor rather than a straight wire through. I just find I get a better picture with it. When I initially did this, because I'm this sort of idiot I am, I used the wrong value capacitor. The picture was not great, shall we say. What you want there is 100 microfarads. I find that works really well for me. New power socket, so that's nice and stable now. And got a really good picture. Right, I haven't refitted the top half of the case simply because I can't get this membrane to go back into the PCB. Came out in one piece, it's not going to go back in. It just keeps folding and bending and cracking. So I think I can write that off as junk. And I've got a new membrane on order. So there's nothing I can actually do now with this computer till that arrives. So I'll put it to one side and I'll make a start on the Plus model. Okay, so here it is, the Plus model, and it's an issue 4S, which is the Samsung made model, so it's Korean. I tend to find the circuit boards are a little bit better made on these. They're a bit more resistant when you put a soldering iron to them. I've never lifted a trace on one yet. And the previous owner has done a sort of fairly rudimentary composite modification there. I think I'll swap that out for a capacitor because I tend to get better picture results anyway. So I'm going to zip through and do the same pre-flight checks that I did on the rubber keyed version with this, and if that all comes back okay, we'll risk putting power to it and we'll see what happens. Okay, so I've gone through, I've made my checks and everything seems fine, so I'll put power to it now and see if the thing actually works. Yeah, it absolutely does. Picture's pretty fuzzy. You probably won't see that very well on the camera, but it's not a very sharp image at all. That could just be down to this unshielded cable that was used for the composite modification, so I'll change that out anyway and see if that improves matters. I'll do the same as I did with the last one. I'll swap out the capacitors as well, and then I can put it through some testing. Lovely. Oh, nice new caps, new voltage regulator, and not very neatly, but I fitted a capacitor to the composite video mod, so hopefully the picture will be a bit sharper. Well, hopefully it'll still work, but yeah, let's give it a go. Right, keyboard is temporarily fitted. Let's give it a go. Yep. And that picture is considerably better, much brighter. Although I do think my issue 2 has a better picture. But hey, yeah. Yeah, that's okay. Yep, seems to work. Does it reset? Yes, it does. Marvellous. Okay, I'll get to work on cleaning up the case. Okay, so here's the thing. The bottom of this computer has no rubber feet. So previous owners removed them for reasons known only to himself. I do have some spares because I've got a spare bottom case, and I think rather than take them out and possibly damage them, I think I'll just swap the entire bottom case out. It's off another Samsung machine as well, it should all match up. I mean, the serial number won't, but I can live with that. So I'll do that. But I also want to take apart the keyboard, give that a bit of a clean as well. So I'll demonstrate how these come apart. It's really, really straightforward. So metal base plate, gently remove the cardboard. And some have that and some don't. Membrane comes away with the rubber mat, which can be cleaned. That should just peel off actually. Yep. Original membrane from Samsung model, and it's still working absolutely fine. And then we just left the keys themselves. Pretty straightforward to take apart. Pull them off at the top, and the plunger that'll fall through to the bottom. You can do that with every single key, and then they can be cleaned and reassembled. Only difference is the spacebar has one of these little stabilizer bars on it, so you'll need to just disconnect that first. And it should just unclip like that. Yep. And fly across the room. Do you know, I'm getting good at sending parts flying across the room in these videos. But yeah, it's under a bit of tension, so I'm going to take these off and get them into some soapy water. Well, now everything's clean, reassembly I suppose. Right, so here's how I like to do this. Spacebar in first with its plunger and its support bar. All the rest of the key plungers in. And then you can put the rubber mat on. I mean, I don't suppose it matters which order you do it in. If you want to put the keys on as you put the plungers in as well, I'm sure it'll be fine. This is just me. So do as you will. So it's rubber mat membrane, I think. Yep. Have I got that backwards? Yes, I have. That's better. That locates. I'm going to try and get the old membrane out of this. So I need to take this top plate off. I suppose the trick is to detach this metal plate without bending it. Now, some of the later models have some little metal locking tabs underneath. This one doesn't, so it is just stuck down. I just need to, if I just pull it gently at the side maybe. Really don't want to do any damage to it. Oops, sorry, bumped the camera. No, it's in quite nice condition, so I don't want to mark it in any way, so I'll think about how I'm going to do this. There it goes. Gently get my fingernails under it, actually, and lift. There it goes. That's one side. Yeah, got away with that, I think. Out comes the mat. And the membrane should, yep, and it does just pop out. Right, so I've got some glue to get rid of. Squirt of WD-40 is usually the best thing for that, just softens it all up and it just wipes off. So that and the underneath of this. Give it all a clean and then I can reinstall, well, not reinstall, then I can install the new membrane. I now have a clean case and I've even put some new double-sided tape on the back of this, and even better, I've got a new membrane. So comparing it to the old one, it's a slightly different shape, but I'm sure it'll work just fine. Let's get this installed. So, should be pretty straightforward. Yep. Some little location pegs for the lining up the keyboard, make sure they're all located correctly. Yep, right, cover. Let me just take the backing off this tape. Fantastic. Those connectors are incredibly tight. I am missing a couple of feet as well. Well, I did order a couple of feet, so near enough the same size as the originals, so I'm missing 2. Let's replace 2. Yep. There. Power it up and make sure everything still works. Yep, we're up and running, and yep, I have a functioning keyboard now. Lovely. Wonderful. Right, let's try loading up some software. Right, issue to machine, hooked up to an audio source, which in this case is my laptop. Let's see if we can get something to load. Let me just try and get a better angle on that. Right, I'm not getting much in the way of a signal coming through, and I know the laptop's powerful enough to do it, so I can only put it down to this socket maybe, so put a bit more tension on it. A bit of a clean out. Right, so I've just finished cleaning up the contacts for the ear socket, so hopefully it was just a bit of corrosion, but we'll see. See what we get now. Now we have an unresponsive keyboard. Ah, you know what, I've had this problem before and I think I know how to fix it. It's probably the membrane itself shorting out. So presumably, with the case open, that'll work, and it does. Close the case up. Oh no, it still works. Yeah, this does happen sometimes with these replacement membranes. They can come into contact with something on the board and just short out, which stops them working. Usually you put a bit of sellotape on the back of the trailing, the tails. Yeah, a bit of sellotape on the back of the tails on the membrane, and that usually sorts it out, but In this case, I think I'm okay. Seems to have seated itself okay, so if I can just button this up without disturbing it again. Okay, still have a keyboard, right. Let's try again. What was I trying to do? Load something, that was right. No, I'm still not having it. So, a couple of issues there. I couldn't get anything to load when feeding it through from my laptop, which normally does work. I've tried it with other Spectrums in the past and it's been fine. And then the keyboard stopped working, which is not uncommon, so I've put a bit of sticky tape on the back of the tails just coming out of the membrane there. That's fixed the keyboard issue. I was assuming whatever it was shorting on was causing maybe a voltage drop or something for the input signal for the audio, and that's why it wasn't working, wasn't loading. But no, I've now tried just using a cassette recorder, and yeah, it's working fine. So maybe the issue too is need a higher input signal than the other computers I've been loading through my laptop. I don't know. But anyway, it seems fine. So I'm going to load this up, let it run, test the computer that way. Such a familiar sight from the 80s that you get a Spectrum with a joystick interface and a tape recorder and the whole thing looks like it's on life support. Not the neatest design really, but do you know what? Brings back memories. Cool. Let's have a game. Right, I'm guessing that's not joystick compatible. What are my keys? Ooh. Do you know what? Who cares? I'll read the instructions on that later. Maybe I'll have a game. But, yeah, that all seems to work. I'm quite happy with that. Take a look at the other one. Spectrum number 2, hooked up in the same way. Now I'm going to try this on my laptop. Maybe it'll accept a lower volume. I don't know. See if this works. Try the Sinclair test program. Yep, that seems fine. Okay, what have we got? Keyboard test Spectrum Plus. Okay. Colour flash, was that? Suppose so. Sound. God, that's annoying. Yep, that works. ULA. RAM and ROM. Ugh. 48k of memory, is this correct? Yes it is. Cool. Okay. Much better way to test it. Load a game. And I've got the perfect game for debugging. Okay. When I said this is the perfect game for debugging, I literally meant debugging. Because with this game, you play a mouse who literally kills bugs in programs. Fantastic game. So, you've got the bugs stealing the code, kill the bugs and return the code. Very basic game. Yeah, no pun intended. And when you do it, complete it, the program runs. In each level you get a slightly more complicated program to debug. Hours of fun. Quite an obscure game as well, nobody ever seems to know about it. Anyway, you get the idea. Well, that was all fairly straightforward. It was more of a service than a repair, so there was nothing actually broken. And everything seemed to go quite well. I mean, yeah, this needed a keyboard membrane, but that's effectively a service item with these things anyway now. So yeah, I'm quite happy. They both seem to function fine. I think I'll wrap this up and I'll start editing all this together. So thanks very much for watching. Much appreciated.